So good morning and welcome to Hanover's latest online event and part of a series focused on culture, inclusion and diversity. We're delighted so many senior financial services leaders are able to join us and continue what's been a very successful series of online events since the start of the year, with more to come. Why do we do them? It's part of our drive to raise awareness and encourage conversation about the opportunities and challenges of culture, inclusion and diversity. It's an area our clients are increasingly investing time and money in, and a big focus internally at Hanover. Firstly, some introductions. My name is Zoe Campbell. I'm a partner of the insurance practice and Hanover's Culture, Inclusion and Diversity lead at Hanover. I'm joined by my colleague, Andrew Watson, who's an associate partner in the technology practice, and of course, our guest speaker, Tali Shlomo, who I'll introduce shortly. For those who don't know Hanover, we are a global provider of talent solutions with a team of over 60 people and have been working with clients for 25 years. Our head office is London, and we have a presence across Europe, the US and Asia. We specialise in 3 talent-related areas: executive search, helping organisations to find first-class leaders and subject matter experts; leadership solutions, helping clients to select and develop high-performing leaders, build effective teams and plan succession; and market intelligence, providing insights and answers to key talent-related questions about salaries, structures and competitor benchmarking. In summary, Hanover's expertise is in helping you find, select, develop and deploy the very best people to grow your business. Before we hear from Tali, I'd like to share some key points. This event is being recorded and will be hosted online, so people who couldn't make it today will benefit from the content. Everyone should be set to mute, but please remain muted throughout to avoid any background noise, and please do double check you are actually on mute. Following my introduction, Tali will present for about 20 minutes. During her presentation, please feel free to share any questions or comments via the chat box. Andrew will then present these to Tali. Where there are similar questions, we'll extract the themes and avoid repetition. So, to our guest speaker. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Tali Shlomo, who has kindly agreed to share her thoughts on work and wellbeing, now more important than ever. Currently, Tali is driving inclusion and diversity and wellbeing on an interim basis for the law firm Sherman & Sterling, as well as coaching and mentoring, having spent many years leading diversity, inclusion and wellbeing in the insurance sector. Tali is an internationally recognised human resources director, diversity and inclusion and thought leader expert. She has received numerous awards and commendations across the financial services and insurance markets for her work in the sector, most recently recognised in the 2020 Insurance Business Global 100 Influential People for creating inclusive workplace cultures. Regularly quoted in the trade press on progressive strategies in this field, Tali is also judged on several market awards from the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, CIPD, insurance, diversity, inclusion, business culture, and mental health and wellbeing. Today, Tali is going to focus on wellbeing, how we can all be mindful of our own and others' wellbeing, and how businesses can drive these initiatives internally. So over to you, Tali.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction and the invitation, and a warm welcome to everyone today. I'm following the screen share now. If I get it wrong, bear with me. I'm trying to manage 2 different, not screens, but documents. So please bear with me. So first of all, how is everyone today? Here we are, 9 months into a pandemic, and we are all, whilst we're all going through the pandemic together, it's definitely unique to each of us. It's definitely, the experience is different emotionally, physically, for every one of us, for different reasons. At the beginning of the pandemic, I spoke a lot about grief. We're all grieving, and we're all grieving for different things. Some people may have lost a loved one. Some people may find it really difficult not being with a loved one because we've been in lockdown and we're about to go into another lockdown. Some people are losing their livelihoods, and so many different reasons. And I think it's really important that we take time to just recognize and acknowledge that. Today is going to be an interesting session, which I'm just going to share some of my insights, but I'm going to start with asking the question, how are you today? We tend to ask the question pretty much on a regular basis, right? And we ask it and we ascribe such importance to it. Yet when we ask the question, we tend to then walk away and start to talk about work, a report that's due, an initiative that we need to put forward, a brainstorming session. But very rarely do we ask the question and pause, the way I've just paused. And when we ask the question, do we take a moment to connect with how we are truly feeling in that moment? It's so important that we first of all connect with how we are feeling. And I truly believe one of the beautiful things that have come out of the pandemic, whilst it's been an incredibly sad time, incredibly heartbreaking, is that we've really started to connect with well-being and well-being in the workplace. So how are you today? Well, there's several things that I look at. It's all part of Form Score. I sit on the board advisory for Form Score. It's been set up by a chap called Rob Stevenson. He's a health campaigner. If anyone would like to learn more about this, please connect with me and I'll share some more information. But when we ask the question, how are you today? I really start to look at how motivated do I feel. And today I feel pretty motivated because I'm here. I'm here with all of you. I feel connected. I'm sharing. So I feel good. I also feel really purposeful. What's my energy levels like? Today I'm pretty good. I went for an early morning walk, really crispy autumn day. I slept well. 2 days ago I didn't sleep so well, but today I slept well, or last night I slept well. So I felt better. And so there's a series of questions that I start to ask myself for each and every morning. How am I today? Because when I start to connect with how I am today, I'm able then to connect with my colleagues, my family, and my friends. And so we use the concept of a form score. And my form score today is 7 out of 10. And I found that during these last few months, I average around 7. I sometimes dip to 6, and very rarely have I moved to an 8. And so what is the form score? How does it work? Some people might be in form score 1 to 3. And for people who are, they are currently seeking support from a professional, or they've already started to have conversations. That could be counselling, that could be medication, but it would be professional support that they would be seeking. 4, 5 is when we start to really pay attention. Are we ready? Do we need that professional support? And really by paying attention to what nourishes and replenishes our well-being, are we then able to really start to have those connections in the workplace on how we can develop a sustainable program. So I'm going to ask you today, how are you? And in a moment, I really hope, fingers crossed, it's going to work. I'm going to try and pull up a poll. The poll is anonymous. It is aggregated. And I'm going to, now bear with me, I think I'm going to try and do this. It is going to work. Can you all see? No, I'm going to have to stop. I am sorry. Right. So I'm going to now show a different screen. Which I hope you can now all see. I'd like to invite you to share what your score is. Mine is a 7, as I shared. What you'll see now is a QR code on the screen. I'd love to invite you in your phone and pull the camera up to the QR code, which will invite you to share your form score. It's aggregated data, it's anonymized. I'd love you all to participate. I know we have about 60 people on the call today. And what we can see in real time, the ranges are 6 to 7, and there's a few who are 5. And thank you for sharing. I'll give it a few more moments. So thank you for there's some wonderful 9s. And thank you for those who are sharing that they're a form score 5. Okay. I'll just wait for it to stabilize in case there's any more. What this is showing us is how we are feeling today. How we are today in the room. Some of us are 9s and 8s and 7s, and we have a few who are 5. And for those who are form score 5 today, thank you for sharing. Thank you everyone for sharing. And for those who are form score 5, please ask yourself, do I need professional support right now? Is there some social connectedness that I can put in place relatively quickly? Because we do find the social connectedness supports and nourishes our well-being. So thank you for sharing. That gives us a sense of where we are all today. So bear with me while I move screens again. So I'm just going to go back to the questions, because this is really important for anyone who is looking for the social connectedness, who might be sleeping well, who is finding that their form score has reduced. Starting to identify what can help to nourish and replenish our well-being. We all have mental health. We all have form, as we describe it. And during these times, we will dip and we will come back up. So I'm just first going to start with the business case and the why. Many of us will be going back into our organizations. I know we're still in the virtual world. And we're looking at how to build a very sustainable program, because well-being is not just through a pandemic. Well-being, I hope one of the beautiful things that comes out of this is that well-being will form part of the strategic objective for any organization. And there is plenty of data that illustrates when we support our people, not only to bring their best authentic self, but we create an environment that their well-being thrives, and we can support them when their form score is a 5. There is a strong correlation between engagement, morale, lower sickness absence, and ultimately return on investment. And that's really important to look at, particularly when we are building business cases, because sometimes the business case of it's just the right thing to do is not enough, unfortunately. So if ever you need the data, there's plenty out there. If you just think about yourself, if you are in a form score 5 and your organization supports you, how wonderful does that make you feel? How valued do you feel? And we find that it unlocks the discretionary effort by 20%. And that's why it's really important that well-being forms part of the strategic objective for any organization. And it doesn't have to be complex. There are many ways we can develop and build a sustainable wellbeing program. I'm just sharing one of them today. It's called 5 Ways to Wellbeing. It was developed by the New Economics Forum. And I know many of you, particularly during the pandemic, have started to pull together a wellbeing program. And if you look at what you're doing, I'm sure they will fit into all of these pillars in some way. So being active is all about being active, being mobile. You know, I every morning will try to go for my morning walk. Not only to keep active, but also what it does is it helps me create my bridging ritual. And what do I mean by that? How do I start my working day? And so by going for a walk and I step back in, I know I'm now going to work. And I try to end the day the same way. And it really is about encouraging those boundaries whilst we are remaining active. And I know many of you are doing all the virtual yoga, Pilates, and all the other exercises that are available. Some of you are going for bike rides. I've heard many people starting to have buddy walks. So if colleagues live near you, socially distancing, walking. So finding different ways to keep active and be mobile, and particularly as we head into winter. Keep learning, nourishing our own cognitive mind is so important. And learning something new, even if it's just reading a book, learning a new skill. It could be a professional development through work. It could be a new project at work, or it could be a hobby. Give is all about the charitable giving, either time, fundraising, pro bono. And we find that for each one of us, the level for each of these pillars is different. For some, the purpose of giving is so high that that's what very much replenishes. And they find that when they're not in that state of giving, they find that that is what replenishes their well-being state. Connect. It's so important in this environment because we are here in this virtual environment. But even though we're in a virtual world, we're still connecting, that connectedness to have a chat. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm definitely getting screen fatigue. My eyes are feeling incredibly tired. And so what I've done now is, where possible, I'll move to a good old-fashioned phone and just have an audio phone call. Because what that enables me to do is I'm able to move at the same time whilst I'm holding a business meeting. And then the last one is taking notice. Taking notice of how are you today, which is where form score really for me comes in. Taking a moment to ask yourself and connect. I use form score every day. There's an app that we're in testing. We're just rolling it out to businesses. So I sit on the advisory board. It's pro bono, the work that I do, because I feel as an HR professional and as a D&I and wellbeing professional, by having a tool that enables us to check in with each other is fundamental. And what the app does is I'm able to have a circle of colleagues that they not only can see my form score every day, I can see theirs. So if I see that their form score has dipped to 5, I can connect with them really quickly and just say, hi, what's going on for you today? What's going on for you right now? So many of you will be doing so much of this because we've seen this, and I just thought it's really important to acknowledge, celebrate, and recognize some of the wonderful things that we're seeing. We're seeing so many social interventions in the virtual world, but that's really important because the social connectedness is so important. We've seen lots of pulse surveys to check in. How are the mood? What is the mood like? How is everyone feeling? We've seen enhanced communication. With that comes a level of engagement. We've seen so many resource packs on family activities, wellbeing initiatives. just last week for half term, I was running a virtual boot camp for colleagues and their children. It was just a 20-minute boot camp every day that the kids could come up with a guided fitness trainer, and we made it fun. Every day there was a different theme. So finding ways to engage, connect is really important. Showing vulnerability, we've definitely seen that during this time, and we've supported our colleagues. Empathy, trust, and empowering our people. Empowering our people to, if they need to go for a walk at 10 o'clock in the morning, it's okay. Tech and well-being, gosh, we've seen screen time go up. And just some of the things that I found has worked really well is the boundaries. And it's really hard, right? It's really hard to set some boundaries because we're at home. Laptop's there, the phone's there. It's so easy. It's so tempting. And anyone who knows me knows that I will check my emails 24/7, but I've worked really hard during the pandemic not to do that. Because setting the boundaries is so important, particularly now that we can't travel into work, travel back home. We don't really have the option of going places. So setting those boundaries are absolutely fundamental. I call them the bridging rituals. I've already talked about screen time. Communication preferences, I think, is really important to also bear in mind. How do we want to be communicated? When are we available? Can you slot in, at best, 15 minutes each day during the day for a 10-minute walk around the block? Just not only for fresh air, not only to be mobile, but also, hopefully, like today, a bit of vitamin D. When we're at home, there's a tendency to multitask. I've seen that. I've heard people share that with me. I would encourage you to do one thing at a time. There's a lot going on right now, and I think we're all feeling fatigued. The uncertainty is definitely impacting how we feel. And being kind to ourselves can only help being kind to those around us in our organisation. And many of you here are leaders, and we need to lead. We need to be role models. Because the power of role models is phenomenal, particularly when we talk about D&I and well-being. So how do we start the conversation? Next time you ask your colleague, how are you? Just pause. It's really uncomfortable to pause, right? But it's incredibly powerful. And then when they say, I'm fine, ask again. How are you doing in this moment in time? Because the likelihood is then they'll start to say, I'm actually good today. The power of conversation can only help us build a D&I and wellbeing strategy that is sustainable. So how do we move forward from where we are at the moment? I think for me, first of all, it's the stigma around mental health. We know pre-pandemic 1 in 4 will experience poor mental health. There's data that's starting to come out that in June alone this year, because of the pandemic, nearly 50% of the UK experience anxiety of some kind. Yet we're still not comfortable to share. And that's why form school or asking how are you and running initiatives where we can talk about mental health and share can only help us smash the stigma. Role models is absolutely critical, not only from a mental health, but a well-being. So when I talk about setting boundaries, if you send an email at 9 o'clock at night, that sends a very strong message. Can you draft the email and send it tomorrow morning? Unless it's absolutely critical. Education awareness I think we're all still learning. We're human beings. We learn what nourishes us. We learn what nourishes and replenishes our people. We learn what initiatives and plans work for our organization and our teams and our business units. Some teams love the quiz nights, some don't. And it's just experiment, find what will work. But there's nothing more powerful than having a conversation. I've put in here accountability, because I think it's really important that we are accountable to look out for each other. Sometimes it really is just all of us, all of our organizations will have a beautiful suite of initiatives. But sometimes it's just about signposting to one, or just making the time to have a 5-minute phone call. Because the social connectedness is so important. And championing, being a champion that will help as we build a D&I strategy with well-being that supports our people.
Thank you, Tali. Thanks ever so much for sharing all of that. It was very thought-provoking. You talked about the things that you've been doing, such as walking and setting boundaries. But what else have you been doing around sustaining your own well-being during these difficult times, which are continuing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So yeah, I think I've mentioned that I go for my early morning walks, and I try really hard to do that. I try to do it in the morning and when I finish work. And now that it gets dark, it's really hard, but I have to keep forcing myself, because how do I know I've ended my day, my working day?
Yes.
So finding, for each person it's different, but for me it's that kind of the physical, I've ended my day. And it could be just literally one day I walked literally to the end of the road and came back. But it was that moment of saying I've ended my working day. It could be other things, and I've also taken up sewing. I'm starting to kind of make a few things. The creativeness is really important, because it's comes back to learning a new skill. It's just the creative fun piece, and actually just injecting a bit of fun in this really, really sad times is so important. It's so important. And the other thing I've done is I managed my news intake. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was taking in too much, and I've now literally allow myself 1 hour a day, and that's it.
Yeah, it can be all consuming.
Totally.
I mean, in terms of, because I'm sure all of us will have been bombarded by video catch-ups because we're not in offices, or conference calls that are videos. And I've actually again started using the phone as I would do in a normal working environment. But I think, how do you think we can be more mindful of this and actually approach it? Because it almost feels like we have to have video calls now because we're not in the office.
So I think there's several things. I'm like yourself. I've been now for pretty much from the summer, started to shift, not all of them, but somewhere I can, to audio phone call, because even now I'm looking at the screen, I can feel my eyes going again. Yes. It's tough, right? I think also if we're going to have video like today, I think people should feel comfortable to switch their video off. I think that's okay. But be curious is what I'd say. Be curious, why has that individual now switched their video off? Ask the question, but ask it from a compassionate place, an empathetic place. Because if it is just because their eyes, we're human beings, we're not meant to be looking at people on screens. Pixels are having an impact. If it's for something different, then I think then we need to be curious and understand why. Because one of the things I always talk about as well is paying attention to the small distinctions on video. because our body language can shift. Our tonality can shift. Even in today's session, my tonality changed. And by paying attention to those small distinctions, we're able to start to tell, how is that individual doing?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we should be up, we're about to go into lockdown again. Do I think we're going to come out of in this the pandemic? I think we still got Q1 next year. And I think creating a place where we have meetings, but we can be flexible on how we have them, I think is really important. So the video is one of them. Switch the video off, or a phone call. I know a question has come through on top tips for countering loneliness during lockdown. For those that live alone and with family. So it's tough. I think making the time to have these moments with friends or family or colleagues, hence why I talked about quiz nights or film nights or virtual dinners. I know it's not the same, but having those moments where you can have people there talking to you while you're in the kitchen cooking. You can be in the kitchen cooking and have someone on FaceTime or on video. And I think that's really important, that we keep talking to people. And that's why you've probably noticed throughout the whole this morning session, I talked a lot about social connectedness. Finding ways to connect with people in the virtual world that we're in. And that could be anything, whatever, find out what nourishes you. Is it a virtual book club? Is it as for me, I was cooking the other night and having a friend on FaceTime. It's just having that person that I can just have a chat with, because I know I couldn't have anyone here with me. So finding different ways that nourishes your own. And most of our organizations have done some fantastic initiatives. Engage with those, and if none of them really fulfill what your hobbies are, make a recommendation. Say, look, here's something I think will be really fun, let's give it a go. And a lot of it is about experimenting and finding ways to have a bit of fun.
Thank you. Obviously we're going into the winter months. There'll be a lot more stress and pressure. You mentioned the darker nights. It's getting dark very, very early. What do you think, where do you see the challenges and the things that people and employers need to be mindful of over the next few months?
So I think as we head into winter and we are now going into another lockdown, the impact on mental health is phenomenal. And finding ways that you can support your own well-being, and hence why I kind of really want to talk about Form School today. And I want to talk about bridging rituals, the boundaries, finding ways that will nourish your well-being, and then therefore you can support the people around you in your organization is fundamental.
Yeah. And this, sorry.
No, sorry, go.
It was just one final question before we hand over to the chat box, which Andrew is going to be managing. This is obviously very important for businesses. How do you think how would you create sustained buy-in and engagement from businesses and boards to ensure well-being and to just look after people?
Yeah, thank you. So partly why I put in there the business matrix, the return on investment on the slides today, was for partly that reason. If we're going to sustain a well-being strategy, and if we are going to measure the impact, and we can measure it as an HR professional, I can measure it. I can measure from my engagement survey. I can measure from sickness levels will reduce. I can measure it from output and performance. I can measure it from conversation. There are so many tools we can use to measure it. But first of all, we need board buy-in, we need ExCo buy-in, so that we can have a budget, an investment, and that it can be sustainable outside of COVID, outside of a pandemic, because this really does need to be a business strategic objective. So having the return of investment, having the data that illustrates what are the benefits, because we can't just go, I know I can't just go to ExCo and say it's the right thing to do. there needs to be a business reason. And so the data is there, clearly states, it clearly shows, even just unlocking discretionary effort by 20%. There's a strong correlation between our well-being and how we are supported in the organization and our level of engagement. And we know when our level of engagement has increased, our output increases, and so forth. It's that cycle that's created here. So I think if you are going to go to your exco and ask for this to remain as a business strategic objective, having the business case, having the return of investment, but be clear how you're going to measure. Also be clear on what initiatives you're going to do. And it doesn't have to be anything new. I'm guarantee you all have something that you're doing. You're doing a whole suite of things. It's how you frame it. How do you pull it back in that shows it's, and I like the 5 pillars to wellbeing because it just creates a framework. But it could be any framework that works for you. And then when you can start to measure, you can start to link it to the business objectives. I know questions come in on...
Yeah, so I was going to hand over to Andrew to manage the chat box. So Andrew, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tali. Thank you, Zoe. And so welcome everybody. And we have the chat room open. So please, if you've got any questions, I'd encourage you to just write them down and we'll get to them. We may not be able to get all the questions through. The aim is still to have a finish as per our deadline, but I'll run through some of the points we've got already. First one is really, Vivian Hole has mentioned that during the pandemic in her organisation, they found coffee morning chats have been much more powerful and appreciated than the quizzes and other social events. I guess maybe sort of technical question would be, what's Tali's suggestions and way to maintain a longer term, as we're in like a marathon, not a sprint during COVID, but a more longer term use of events like coffee mornings and so on?
Thank you. And I think this is such an interesting observation, very insightful, because what we're finding is fatigue has kicked in, fatigue of the social events. But what we're also finding is some people really still enjoy them and find them incredibly useful because of the social connectors and because of the fun element. So I think I've also introduced the coffee mornings, just informal. Let's just grab 10 minutes having a coffee, no agenda, no business agenda. And they've been incredibly useful as well. And we end up talking about work, but it's very informal, very relaxed. What the quizzes have done and the social events have done is particularly for anyone who is on their own and who is lonely and particularly when we were in the beginning of lockdown, when there was really nowhere to go or do anything, there was an opportunity for people to connect. So what I have found is on some of the initiatives we've paused, because what tends to happen as human beings, we get bored, we get fatigued, but I've introduced a variety. And we keep saying that these are experiments. And what we also found is some business units find the quiz nights continue to have a place that they enjoy. And I think it all will come down to the teams that you have and what they will find that nourishes them. But I think having a variety is so important. We've also introduced so having virtual workouts as teams. So we switch our videos off so everyone feels really comfortable. But what we've done is it's created an opportunity for people to say, 10 o'clock in the morning, we're all going to jump on for half an hour exercise. And we get about 20 people, which is amazing. And so we try and do things during the working day as well, so that you still have your own personal time.
Perfect, thank you. Another question was, again, it's a comment someone's made, but I'll turn to a question because I think it's quite an interesting one. And it is, forgive me, the person's described themselves as N-Bensi, so I hope that's right. Anyway, they write, I received an SAD, a SAD light, to help in the darker months. I guess I'll turn to a question for you, Tali, and what technology, what bits of kit would you encourage to have around the desktop environment or the home environment to support wellness in your home working place?
So just on the SAD light, yes, I know so many people find it useful because it gets dark at 4. I think that's why where we can utilize even just 10 minutes, if you can put in your diary to go for a walk, or even just step out the front door, is really important. Just a bit of fresh air. I know it sounds really simple, but actually a lot of the things that we've experienced during this time have been some of the really simple things that have been taken away from us. Not being able to travel, not being able to be with loved ones, not being able to be in the coffee shop with our colleagues or in a meeting room. And how do we create some of that and nourish that connectedness, which is so important. In terms of the technology, I think it's very personal to every individual of what works for them. What I have seen is that we don't make it compulsory for people to put their videos on when we're in a Zoom or Teams meeting. It's very much very relaxed. If you like to put your video on, great. What I do encourage is everyone to pay attention to the fine distinctions that we see in behaviour change, because as we go through the pandemic, we're already 9 months in. Some people are feeling really tired, and paying attention to, are they getting dressed in the morning? Are they still making an effort in the morning? Are they logging on 10 minutes later? If so, is everything okay? And it's just those conversations which I find paying attention to the distinctions is really important.
Thank you, good. And there's an email question we received. What are Tali's views on how the role of HR leaders has changed under COVID? I'm guessing obviously with application to wellness, but what are your thoughts on how HR as a position in the company and the leaders of the HR function, how they're adapting or not adapting to the circumstances?
So I think let's start off with the pandemic is unprecedented times, and we are all experiencing this for the first time. Even the most experienced CEOs, the most experienced HR leader, every business leader is experiencing this for the first time. And I think what I mentioned is what I said at the beginning is, even though we are all going through the pandemic at the same time together, it is unique for each of us. And we mustn't forget that everyone is going through something personal. There's a personal impact to what is happening right now. And we are working from home, we are living from home. What's happened when we were in the office, some of us were able to leave our personal experiences at home when we stepped into the office. We can't do that. And I think what HR leaders are now experiencing is how vital well-being should be as part of the strategic objective. And I think also recognizing that the concept of leadership has changed. It's really now looking at compassionate leadership. Compassionate leadership is really important. And we can see the data, and that's why I really wanted to share some of the data today. So how the role of HR leaders changed, I think it's been a time where connecting with everyone in the organization, reframing what leadership is and reframing how HR can support the business. And HR has had, it's been tough times, it's been challenging. And I salute every HR professional who has handled this time, because this is where HR has really been a business leader. And we have for many years spoken about HR should be on Exco. This has been the time. So I think as an HR professional, I say we've learned a lot, and we'll probably, when we come out of it, we'll look and be proud of what we've achieved. And yes, there's some things we probably haven't done as well as we could have done, but we did the best we could at that moment. And I think more importantly, the board now recognise the value HR leaders bring.
Okay, thank you. And a sort of follow-on question a little bit is as follows from someone: should wellness programs be formalised into legal requirements involving health and safety obligations? So
health and safety obligations there's always been the 1974 Act, there's always been a legal requirement, but from a wellness perspective, I'd like us to, and I think this is definitely coming out from the pandemic, we're moving away from what is it might be a legal requirement to how do we create a culture. And I love Zoe's intro, the culture, because it is all about culture. Culture is about behaviours. It's how we show up, it's how we behave, it's how we support each other, it's how we support you for your next promotion. And so I'd say it's really important that we focus on initiatives that help people thrive, because when people thrive, we can measure it. And then what happens is the business starts to recognize from their increased revenue, increased whatever their core matrices are, in effect, it will be their revenue and income. And we can see that because people, and we saw it from the data, there's plenty of data that shows, and we know this, even just all of us here today in the room, when we have leaders who support us, where we can thrive, we tend to give more. We tend to do better.
Perfect, thank you. A question from Sophie Money. Hi Tali, do you have any recommendations for engaging all staff in wellbeing? It can be easily dismissed by staff who aren't interested, despite it being something that we all need.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful question, so thank you. And for me, to providing a variety of initiatives, so I know some organizations do mindfulness, some do yoga, some do nutrition, some, you know, it could be a whole range of initiatives. Role models are so important, and senior role models are really important, because when you have a senior role model who is attending a virtual event, or he's always speaking about their own well-being, or speaking about a colleague's or family member's well-being, what tends to happen is we created a safe place. And I think so role models is so important. I think finding different ways to communicate as well, because we all take information differently. And as many of you here will know, is that sometimes we have to say something 7 times in order for you to have heard it only the first time. So finding different ways to communicate and engage is really important. And if you can create a buddy program, that's really great, because what I tend to try and do is invite a +1. So if I'm coming to an event like today, I would invite a +1 and say, just come along, see if there's anything interesting for you. And what it does, it starts to create a place where we can just share in a safe place.
Perfect, thank you. And building on the subject of role models there, Tali, one question we had in was, which companies out there do you see as being good role models for wellness programs, and why?
So I'm not going to share which ones, because I don't think it's fair, if I'm honest. I think what's really important is to spend some time looking at what you're doing in your organization. And you would have done lots of things, but take a moment to look at how have you communicated it? How have you engaged? Can it be framed as part of a framework, maybe like the 5 ways to wellbeing? Have your initiatives focused on mental health, or have they focused on the physical, the being active? Because what I've also done is put it as part of my culture program, because when we put it as part of our culture program in terms of how we behave, how we show up, that asking the question, for example, how are you today? And feeling comfortable to share how I am starts to make a difference. So creating a holistic program is really important, but also signposting. You will all have benefits in your organization. Signposting. All HR leaders will say, I've got an EAP scheme. Have you signposted it? How do you use it? All your other benefits schemes will have, particularly during COVID, have enhanced what their offerings are. So there's a whole beautiful suite of content there that you can use. So it's signposting people to that.
Okay, perfect. Now, this is a question that's coming from somebody else again. Is there a difference in age and generations regarding attitudes to wellness at work?
Oh, I love that question. So I actually just recently wrote a blog on age diversity and wellness. I have seen that mental health has brought the generations together during COVID, because we're all experiencing mental health. We all have mental health, and we're all experiencing, despite which generation you're at, you are experiencing something, some emotion, and that's created a deeper connection. And there's data from the Mental Health Foundation that shows that the millennials and baby boomers are experiencing the same level of anxieties. And I think that's bringing the generations together. How do we bring the generations together in the workplace? You know, I've always used reverse mentoring, and I know we've used it from a D&I perspective. I think from a wellness perspective, it also works, because sharing, and it comes back to social connectedness. We are human beings. We like to talk. We like to connect. We want to be around people. Even I'm an introvert. Even as an introvert, I want to be around people. And I think recognizing that reverse mentoring, particularly in this world where we can share, is so important. So a generational question, I love that, because that's when we all look at diverse inclusion. For so long, we've not paid enough attention on age diversity. So anywhere that I can bring the intersectionality together, for me, is incredibly powerful. And this is the time.
Perfect, and thank you. And speaking of time, this is probably the best make the last question from the panel show up on the floor. And it's coming from Zoe, actually. I think it's quite certainly something I can relate to. We see a lot of firms talking about culture, inclusion, and diversity. But do you think that this is really being acted upon, or is it just skin deep, and the norms of pre-COVID are still the true culture?
So, look, I think culture is all about behaviours. It's all about how we show up, and it's a mindset shift. It takes time. It's a journey, and COVID pandemic has been incredibly sad. It's been heartbreaking, and I also like to see there's been a bit of magic. There's been some beautiful moments where, for the first time, wellness programs are starting to form part of the business. Culture and diversity inclusion are also starting to form part of the business, and we've seen what's happening around us in today's, you know, with Black Lives Matter. We've seen what's going on through the pandemic, and I think we can't go back, and I don't think we will go back. I think there'll be occasions that we'll take one step forward, 2 steps back, or 3 steps sideways. It's okay, because we're learning, we're navigating. But I think what is really important is getting commitment from board and exco. And that's why the data, and that's why the business case is so important. So having board exco commitment, having role models is so fundamental in order to move forward.
Superb, thank you, Tali. On that note, I'll hand back to Zoe for closing comments.
Thanks, Andrew, and thank you so much, Tali, for your talk this morning, which was so insightful, and also for answering so many interesting questions. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to add before we close down the webinar?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for everyone joining today. I hope, if there's one thing I would leave you with, is spend some time getting to know what nourishes your well-being. It's so important, because learning what nourishes your well-being, you're able to support other people in your organisation. And for any HR leaders here in the room today, well done during these times, because they've been tough times, and just creating a framework around well-being, because I'm sure everyone has lots of different things in place, but just creating a framework so that it comes across as holistic will make all the difference. So thank you.
Thanks, Tali. So thank you everyone for your time and for joining us. I hope you found it all interesting and informative this morning. Hanover will send a feedback survey, so we'd be very grateful for your comments, and I know Tali will be as well. And we'll also send you a link to the video recording of the event. So lastly, on behalf of Tali and Hanover, we welcome the opportunity to follow up discussion and with the organisation about culture, inclusion and diversity, or other related talent areas. And I know Tali will be very keen to engage with any of you. So we'll be in touch to gauge your interest in doing so. So thank you, and we'll now close the meeting.